She whispered to horses like they were family. The cowboy said, "You speak their language." Emma had always felt a pull toward the wide open spaces, toward the gentle sway of grass in the wind and the soft sounds of hooves on dirt. She had grown up surrounded by animals, but it was the horses that had always understood her in a way no one else could. When she was a little girl, she would spend hours in her grandfather's stables, whispering to the horses as if they were old friends, and listening to their soft snorts and whinnies as though they were speaking back. That connection had always been a secret between her and the animals, a private world where she could feel at home. Years had passed, and life in the city had pulled her away. Emma had moved for work, for friends, and for a world that seemed full of endless possibilities. But the hum of traffic and the cold walls of apartment buildings never quite filled the emptiness she felt inside. Every night, when the lights of the city flickered outside her window, she would close her eyes and imagine the rolling hills of Montana, the smell of hay in the stables, and the quiet presence of horses moving gracefully across open fields. That feeling never left her, no matter how far she went. The letter came unexpectedly. It was from the lawyer handling her grandfather's estate. His words were simple but carried weight. The family ranch needed care, and it was now hers to oversee. Emma felt a mixture of emotions: sadness at the thought of her grandfather's passing, anxiety at the responsibility she had never imagined, and a deep, undeniable excitement at the chance to return to the place she loved more than anywhere else. After months of planning, she finally packed her few belongings, left the city behind, and drove north past long stretches of highway, over rivers that glimmered in the sun, and into the heart of Montana. When she arrived, the ranch seemed almost frozen in time. The wooden fences creaked in the wind, paint peeled from the old barn doors, and wildflowers had begun to grow along the edges of the corral. Emma's heart beat faster. Everything smelled like home: fresh hay, earth after rain, and a faint scent of the horses themselves. The animals recognized her before she even stepped into the paddock. From the far corner of the field, a mare lifted her head and let out a soft whinny. Emma's heart swelled. She walked slowly toward them, her hand held out gently, her voice soft. "Hello, old friends," she whispered. "I'm home." The horses shifted, curious but calm. They had always known her, even if she had been gone for years. One by one they approached, sniffing her hands, rubbing their heads against her shoulder and nuzzling her cheeks. Emma laughed softly, the sound bright and warm in the open air. She had missed this more than she realized. The world of the ranch, of animals and open skies, welcomed her back like a long-lost friend. As she moved through the paddock, she noticed the details that made each horse unique. There was Daisy, a gentle mare with a white blaze running down her forehead; Thunder, a powerful stallion with a coat the color of midnight; and little Spark, a foal who had never known anyone but the ranch hands, yet seemed curious about Emma immediately. She spoke to each of them as though they were family, using her voice to soothe, encourage, and connect. It was not training, it was understanding. From the edge of the paddock, a figure watched her. He was a cowboy named Jack, tall, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that had seen decades of ranch life. He had worked on the ranch long before Emma's grandfather had passed, and he knew every horse, every fence, and every story that the land held. Yet he had never seen anything like this. Emma moved among the horses with a quiet confidence, a calm that seemed to ripple through the animals themselves. She did not command them, she spoke to them, and they listened. "She speaks their language," Jack muttered under his breath. He had never said those words to anyone before, and now he could not take his eyes off her. There was something in the way she moved, the way she paused to let a horse sniff her hand, the way she tilted her head and listened to their soft whinnies that made even the wildest stallion lower its head to her. Jack knew instinctively that Emma had a gift, something rare, something that could not be taught. Emma spent hours in the paddock that first day. She cleaned the stables, fed the horses, and walked the fields, talking softly to them, brushing their coats, and letting them approach her at their own pace. She could feel their personalities. Daisy was patient, Thunder was proud but wary, and Spark was full of energy and curiosity. As she worked, Emma remembered the stories her grandfather used to tell her. Stories of horses who had been saved from neglect, stories of ranch hands who had learned to respect the animals rather than control them, and stories of the quiet moments when a horse would nuzzle a child's hand or follow them across the field without a word. By the end of the day, Emma was exhausted but fulfilled. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the paddock. The horses grazed peacefully, some resting their heads on each other's backs, and Emma stood among them, feeling a sense of belonging that she had not known for years. She looked toward Jack, who had moved closer without being noticed. He tipped his hat and gave a small nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of what he had just witnessed. Over the next few days, Emma continued to explore the ranch and reconnect with the animals. She learned the stories behind each horse, the ones her grandfather had rescued, the ones that had been born on the ranch, and the ones that had been shy or difficult. She found old journals and notes left by her grandfather, filled with advice and observations about the horses, about ranch life, and about the importance of patience, empathy, and understanding. It was as if he had known she would return and had left behind a guide to help her navigate the world he loved so deeply. Emma also began to notice the subtle ways the land had changed. Fences needed repair, barns needed maintenance, and some fields had become overgrown. It would take time and effort to restore the ranch to its former glory, but she did not feel overwhelmed. With each horse she cared for, each corner of the land she explored, she felt a sense of purpose and connection. This was her home, her responsibility, and her joy. The other ranch hands, at first curious and skeptical, began to take notice. They had never seen anyone interact with the horses the way Emma did. Some were impressed, others were cautious, but all could see that she had something special. Jack, who had spent his entire life working with animals in practical ways, found himself both amazed and humbled. He watched as Emma led Thunder through the paddock without force, as Daisy nuzzled her shoulder without hesitation, and as Spark danced around her feet in playful curiosity. He realized that Emma's presence changed the animals, not just in how they behaved, but in how they felt. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of orange and pink, Emma sat on the fence watching the horses graze. Jack approached quietly, leaning on the rail beside her. "You really do speak their language," he said softly. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I just listen," she replied. "They have so much to say if you take the time to hear them." Jack nodded, understanding in a way that went beyond words. The ranch, the horses, and even the wind seemed to acknowledge her presence. There was something rare and beautiful in the way she fit into this world, a way that reminded him of his younger days and of the stories his grandfather had told him about the magic of connection between humans and animals. As night fell and the stars appeared, Emma felt a peace she had not known for a long time. The city, the noise, and the endless rush of life faded from her mind. Here, surrounded by the gentle movements of horses and the quiet of the open land, she belonged. She belonged not only to the ranch, but to the horses who had always waited for her return. And as she drifted to sleep that night, the sound of soft hooves and calm breathing in the stables lulled her into a deep sense of purpose and joy. Emma's first day back at the ranch was only the beginning. She had returned not just to care for the land and the horses, but to rediscover herself, to reconnect with the magic she had always known, and to honor the legacy of her grandfather. And somewhere in the quiet of the Montana night, she could feel the horses watching over her, not as animals, but as family, ready to welcome her into their world once more. After the first few days at the ranch, Emma began to understand that life here was not as simple as it had once seemed when she was a child. The horses were not the only beings that needed care. The land itself required attention. Fences were weak in some areas, barns creaked ominously in the wind, and some of the fields were overgrown with weeds. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Emma felt a quiet determination. She had returned not just for herself, but for the animals who had waited for her and for the land that her grandfather had loved. The horses quickly became her teachers. Each one had a unique personality and temperament, and Emma learned to notice the smallest details, the flick of an ear, a gentle step forward, a subtle shift in weight. These details told her more than words ever could. Daisy, the gentle mare with the white blaze, needed reassurance before stepping into a new paddock. Thunder, the proud stallion, had a stubborn streak and would test anyone who tried to lead him. And Spark, the curious foal, had endless energy, but was easily frightened by sudden noises. Emma realized that her grandfather's old advice about patience and observation was not just wisdom. It was essential for survival, for connection, and for understanding the world of these animals. One morning, Emma arrived at the paddock to find a scene that made her heart tighten. A horse she had never seen before, a chestnut mare with a scar across her face, was trembling in the corner of the field. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her muscles were tense. Emma knelt at the edge of the fence and spoke softly, not rushing, letting the mare observe her from a distance. Slowly, the mare's ears flicked toward her voice. Emma began to step closer, keeping her movements calm and measured. She could see the mare's history in the way she held herself. She had been hurt, neglected, or perhaps abandoned. Emma's heart ached for her, but she knew that this horse needed someone to understand, not to dominate. "I won't hurt you," she whispered. "I'm just here to be your friend." The mare watched her for a long time, then took a tentative step forward. Emma's hand extended slowly, letting the animal come to her on her own terms. Inch by inch, the mare approached until finally she nuzzled Emma's palm. A sigh of relief escaped Emma's lips. This was not just a moment of trust, it was a small miracle, a bridge built with patience and love. Jack, who had been observing from a distance, shook his head in quiet wonder. He had trained horses for decades, using ropes, commands, and discipline. And yet, he had never seen anyone gain trust like this without any force at all. Over the next few weeks, Emma focused on building relationships with the horses who were most difficult. She spent hours walking through the paddocks, brushing coats, and whispering words of reassurance. Sometimes she would simply sit among them, letting them come to her in their own time. Thunder tested her patience almost every day, tossing his head or refusing to move forward when she tried to lead him. But Emma never raised her voice or used force. Instead, she observed his behavior, learned his patterns, and found the small ways to earn his trust. Eventually, he began to follow her steps willingly, even letting her touch his mane without resistance. Emma's gentle approach began to attract attention beyond the ranch. Neighbors and local ranchers started to visit, curious about this young woman who seemed to have a way with even the wildest horses. Some were skeptical, whispering among themselves that experience and toughness mattered more than words and patience. Others watched quietly, amazed as Emma led a once aggressive horse to graze calmly or coaxed a frightened foal out of hiding. Emma welcomed anyone who wanted to learn, but she never tried to prove herself. Her actions spoke for her, and slowly her reputation grew. One afternoon, Jack came to Emma with a challenge. "There's a stallion down by the creek," he said. "He's new to the area and hasn't been handled much. He's strong and he's dangerous. Most people stay away." Emma listened carefully, feeling a mixture of excitement and caution. She knew this horse would test her in ways the others had not. "I'll try," she said quietly. Jack raised an eyebrow but nodded, sensing that she genuinely understood what she was getting into. The next day, Emma walked to the creek, her boots sinking slightly in the soft earth. The stallion was there, his muscles tense and his eyes wide with fear. She did not approach immediately. Instead, she sat on a fallen log nearby and watched. She spoke softly, telling him stories about the fields, about the wind, about the gentle hands that had cared for the horses before him. Slowly, the stallion's breathing became less erratic, his stance less rigid. Emma inched closer, never forcing contact, letting him set the pace. After a long hour, the stallion took a cautious step forward and allowed her hand to touch his nose. It was a small step, but a huge victory. Jack, who had followed at a distance, nodded in approval. He had seen countless horses in his life, but few had responded so quickly to kindness alone. Through these days of work, Emma discovered something remarkable, not just about the horses, but about herself. She had been away from this life for so long that she had forgotten how much patience, empathy, and attention could change the world. Each horse she worked with reminded her of her grandfather's gentle voice, his quiet presence in the stables, and the way he had taught her to notice things others overlooked. She realized that this was not just a skill, it was a calling. She felt alive in a way that the city had never allowed, full of purpose and connection. The horses also taught Emma about resilience. Some of them had been through neglect, fear, or injury. They had learned to distrust humans, to protect themselves by avoiding contact. But with care, they began to heal. Daisy, once timid around new people, now nuzzled Emma whenever she approached. Thunder learned to follow without resistance. The chestnut mare with the scar, who had once trembled at every movement, began to graze peacefully among the other horses. Even Spark, the foal, learned to balance his curiosity with respect for the world around him. Emma watched these changes with awe, realizing that trust was built in small moments, not grand gestures. As Emma's bond with the horses deepened, she also started to understand the subtle relationships among them. Horses communicated with one another in ways humans could barely perceive: the flick of an ear, a shift in weight, a soft nuzzle. Emma began to notice these signals and respect them, allowing the herd to teach her as much as she taught them. She observed how Daisy would guide Spark away from danger, how Thunder would assert leadership without aggression, and how the horses worked together to create a calm and safe environment. In learning their language, Emma had learned a new way of seeing the world, a way that emphasized listening, observation, and compassion. One late evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, Emma sat in the paddock surrounded by the horses. Jack joined her, leaning against the fence, and watched in silence. "You really do understand them," he said finally. "I've been around horses my whole life, and I've never seen anyone like you. It's not just training, it's something else." Emma smiled, stroking Daisy's mane. "I just try to listen," she said. "They tell you everything if you pay attention." Jack nodded, realizing that the girl who had returned to the ranch was not just learning from the horses, she was teaching him something too. The days turned into weeks, and Emma settled into a rhythm. She worked with the horses, repaired fences, cleared fields, and maintained the barns. Each task was accompanied by the soft sounds of the animals, who had come to trust her completely. She began keeping a journal, writing notes about each horse, their behaviors, and the progress they were making. Her journal became a map of understanding, a record of patience, and a guide for anyone who might come after her. Emma also began to notice the effect she had on the people around her. Ranch hands who had been rough and impatient started to adopt some of her methods, quietly observing how calm words and gentle gestures could achieve results that force never could. Jack, in particular, found himself reconsidering the way he had always approached horses. It was not that his experience was wrong, but that Emma's approach reminded him that connection and empathy were just as important as strength and skill. Together, they began to develop a new way of working on the ranch, one that combined experience with intuition, discipline with compassion. By the end of the part, Emma had not only gained the trust of the horses, but had also started to earn the respect of everyone around her. Her reputation as someone who truly understood animals spread through the community, drawing neighbors, ranchers, and visitors who wanted to see this extraordinary connection. But for Emma, it was never about recognition. It was about being present, being patient, and being willing to listen. The horses had welcomed her home, and in return she had given them care, attention, and understanding. Together, they had begun a journey of trust, healing, and discovery that would shape the future of the ranch in ways no one could yet imagine. The days at the ranch were growing longer, and the bond between Emma and the horses was stronger than ever. She had come to know every horse individually, their fears, their habits, their quirks. But life on a ranch was never without challenges. One afternoon, dark clouds began to gather on the horizon, moving quickly and bringing with them a sense of unease. The wind picked up, rustling the trees and whistling through the fences. Emma paused mid-step, glancing at the sky. Storms were normal in Montana, but this one felt different. It carried a weight, a sudden urgency that made her heart beat faster. The horses in the paddock sensed it too. Their calm demeanor vanished, replaced with uneasiness. Daisy pawed at the ground nervously, Thunder snorted loudly and backed toward the fence, and even little Spark, who was usually fearless, darted from one side of the field to the other. Emma's instincts told her that she needed to act quickly. She walked calmly toward the herd, speaking softly, her voice a steady anchor amid the growing chaos. "Stay with me," she whispered, extending her arms slowly. "I'm here, you're safe." The horses hesitated, unsure if they could trust the safety of her words over the storm that approached. Emma knew that rushing or panicking would only make them worse. She took deep breaths, keeping her own heartbeat steady so the horses could sense her calm. Inch by inch, they gathered near her, forming a loose circle around her as she moved through the paddock. The wind gusted sharply, bending the tall grass and shaking the trees. Emma's hair whipped across her face, but she did not move hastily. She spoke softly, repeating their names, and slowly they began to respond. Thunder, the proud stallion, still held back, his muscles tense, ready to bolt at any moment. Emma stepped toward him slowly, never taking her eyes off his. "You can do this," she said gently. "We'll get through it together." Thunder snorted, stamped the ground, then slowly, cautiously lowered his head and moved closer to her side. Emma felt a wave of relief. Each small step was a victory. Each moment of trust was a bond strengthened. As the storm approached, lightning flashed across the sky, followed by deep, rolling thunder. A bolt struck near the edge of the field, and panic erupted among the herd. Horses whinnied loudly, some running in circles, others trying to leap over fences in fear. Emma's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain steady. She ran into the midst of the chaos, her arms outstretched, her voice clear and firm. "Come to me, all of you, trust me." It was a race against instinct. Horses are creatures of flight, and panic can easily take over. But Emma had spent weeks building trust. She called each horse by name, her voice calm yet commanding. Slowly, like magic, they began to listen. Daisy and Spark moved toward her, ears flicking back and forth, eyes wide but following her direction. Thunder, the last to follow, hesitated, then finally gave a low snort and stepped forward, his head brushing Emma's shoulder as he passed. Jack and the ranch hands had been watching from a distance, frozen in awe and fear. They had never imagined anyone could control a herd in the middle of such a panic. Yet here she was, moving through them as if the storm and the chaos did not exist. Her voice, her calm, and her unwavering presence guided the horses step by step toward the safety of the barn. By the time Emma and the herd reached the stables, the storm had grown fierce. Rain fell in sheets, the wind shook the wooden walls, and lightning flashed across the sky. Emma led the horses inside, making sure each one had space to settle and was accounted for. She stayed in the barn with them, checking for injuries and calming their nerves with gentle words and soft pats. Jack finally entered, drenched and shivering. He looked around the barn, eyes wide with astonishment. I've never seen anything like this," he said, shaking his head. "You didn't just stop them from running, you saved them." Emma smiled softly, exhausted but relieved. "They trusted me," she replied simply. "That's all it took." The storm raged through the night, and Emma stayed in the barn, listening to the sound of rain on the roof and the calm breaths of the horses. Some slept close to her, while others found comfort in the corners of the barn. She realized that trust was fragile, but when earned, it could endure even the most frightening circumstances. She felt proud of the bond she had built, not through dominance or fear, but through patience, love, and understanding. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean landscape and a soft, golden sunrise. The horses were calmer, grazing in the paddock as if nothing had happened. Emma walked among them, brushing wet coats and whispering reassurances. She noticed subtle changes. The chestnut mare with the scar, who had been trembling the day before, now walked confidently beside Daisy. Thunder, once so proud and wary, lowered his head to allow Emma to touch him without hesitation. Spark pranced playfully around her feet, full of life again. The storm had tested them all, and they had survived together. Emma realized that challenges like this were part of ranch life, part of the bond between humans and animals. Trust could be shaken, but it could also be reinforced in moments of fear and courage. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons the horses had taught her, and for the courage she had found within herself. As the days passed, Emma continued to care for the herd, repairing fences damaged by the storm and clearing debris from the paddocks. She worked alongside Jack, who had begun to understand the power of her gentle approach. Together, they strengthened the ranch, blending his experience with her intuition. Jack started to adopt some of Emma's methods, learning to be more patient and observant, realizing that the horses responded far better to calm guidance than to force. One afternoon, a new challenge arose. A young foal had wandered into a neighboring field, separated from its mother. Emma ran toward it, her boots sinking into the wet earth, rain still falling lightly from the remnants of the storm. The foal was terrified, darting back and forth, its tiny legs trembling. Emma knelt at a safe distance, speaking softly, letting it see she meant no harm. Slowly, she extended her hand, letting the foal approach on its own terms. Inch by inch, it came closer, nuzzling her palm before she guided it back to its mother. Jack watched silently, once again amazed at her ability to remain calm and connect with animals in moments of fear. Emma's connection with the horses also began to influence the way the community viewed the ranch. People came to see her work, curious about the young woman who could calm the most frightened animals. Some stayed to help, others simply watched and learned. Emma welcomed everyone. sharing her knowledge and showing that patience and understanding could achieve what force never could. She began to realize that her gift was not just about working with horses. It was about teaching people to see the world differently, to listen carefully, and to act with empathy. But the storm had also left a reminder that life on the ranch was unpredictable. A fallen tree blocked one of the main paths to the fields, and several fences had been destroyed. Emma and Jack worked tirelessly to repair them, moving lumber, hammering nails, and reinforcing weak spots. The work was exhausting, but Emma felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything she had known in the city. She was building something lasting, not just repairing fences, but creating a safe and nurturing environment for the animals she loved. One evening, after a long day of work, Emma sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the horses graze in the golden light of sunset. Thunder pawed the ground lazily, Daisy grazed quietly, and Spark played near the edge of the field. Emma felt a profound sense of connection, not just to the animals, but to the land, to the legacy of her grandfather, and to the quiet magic that existed in this world. Jack joined her, tipping his hat and offering a small smile. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "The horses trust you, we all trust you, and maybe we've all learned a little from you too." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the day lift from her shoulders. "It's not just me," she said. "It's all of us working together, listening and being patient. That's what makes this place strong." Jack nodded, and for the first time Emma felt like she truly belonged, not just among the horses, but among the people who cared for the land and the animals as much as she did. The storm had tested them, but it had also revealed their strength, their trust, and their courage. Emma knew that life on the ranch would continue to bring challenges, storms, injuries, unpredictable behavior, but she also knew that together they could face anything. The horses had taught her the most important lesson of all, that calmness, patience, and genuine care could overcome fear and build unbreakable bonds. By the end of Part 3, Emma had not only survived the storm, but had strengthened her connection with the horses and the ranch. Her courage, patience, and empathy had become a guiding light for both animals and humans alike. And as night fell once again over the fields, Emma knew that she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, because she had learned the true meaning of trust, love, and partnership with the creatures she called family. Months passed since Emma had returned to the ranch, and with each day, the bond between her and the horses grew stronger. The once neglected property had begun to regain its former glory. Fences were sturdy again, barns were repaired, and the fields were cleared and lush. The horses were healthier, calmer, and more confident, reflecting the care and attention Emma had poured into them. But her journey was far from over. Emma felt a growing desire not just to care for these animals, but to help others who had struggled like they once had. Word of her gentle approach spread beyond the small community. People began visiting the ranch from neighboring towns, curious to see the young woman who could calm even the most difficult horses with her voice and patience. Some came with questions, others with horses they could not handle, and many simply to watch her work. Emma welcomed them all, happy to share what she had learned. Her mission had grown beyond the ranch. It was about showing that trust, understanding, and care could achieve results far greater than fear or force ever could. One day, a man arrived with a horse that had been abused by its previous owners. The animal was skittish, constantly flinching at any sudden movement and refusing to eat or move. Emma knelt beside the horse, letting it see her calm presence. She whispered its name softly, moving slowly and deliberately. At first, the horse recoiled, but Emma did not rush. She stayed patient, offering gentle words and soft strokes, letting it approach her on its own terms. Over several hours, the horse gradually relaxed, allowing her to touch its neck and eventually nuzzle her hand. The man watched in amazement. "I've tried everything," he admitted quietly. "But you just know what to do," Emma smiled. "You just have to listen," she replied simply. Her reputation as a horse whisperer began to grow, but Emma never let it change her. She remained humble, focused on the animals and the land she loved. Each day was a balance of work, observation, and care. She repaired fences, cleaned barns, fed the horses, and tended to their health. But she also spent hours simply being with them, sitting quietly in the paddocks, walking through the fields, or brushing their coats while speaking softly. The horses had become not just her responsibility, but her family, and she cherished every moment she spent with them. Jack, who had been her mentor and friend from the beginning, continued to work alongside her. Over time, he adopted many of Emma's methods, blending his years of experience with her gentle approach. Together, they created a new standard for how the ranch operated, one that emphasized patience, empathy, and understanding. Jack often marveled at how much he had learned from Emma despite his decades of experience. He had always been proud of his ability to manage horses, but he realized that Emma had shown him a deeper truth, that connection and trust were far more powerful than force or fear. One evening, as the sun began to set over the fields, Emma walked through the paddock with Daisy, Thunder, Spark, and the chestnut mare with the scar. She paused, watching the horses move gracefully across the land, their coats shining in the golden light. She felt a deep sense of pride and fulfillment. The ranch was alive again, not just because of repairs or hard work, but because of the trust and harmony she had nurtured. Each horse reflected a story of healing and growth, a testament to patience, love, and understanding. Emma also began documenting her work in a journal, writing notes about each horse, their behaviors, and the progress they had made. She included observations about how subtle gestures could communicate trust, how patience could transform fear into confidence, and how empathy could change lives. Her journal became a guide not just for herself, but for anyone who might follow in her footsteps. She knew that the lessons she had learned on the ranch were universal, applicable not just to horses, but to all creatures and people who needed understanding and care. The community began to notice the transformation of the ranch. Local ranchers sought Emma's advice for their own animals. Families brought children to see how she worked with the horses, teaching them lessons about kindness, patience, and responsibility. Emma welcomed everyone, offering guidance and support, never claiming credit for what the horses had accomplished themselves. She knew that true success came not from recognition, but from the trust and harmony she had built with the animals. One day, a local newspaper came to write a story about Emma and her work. They were captivated by the young woman who had returned to her grandfather's ranch, and through patience and understanding, transformed not only the horses but the community. The article highlighted her methods, her dedication, and the extraordinary bond she shared with the animals. Emma read it quietly, smiling to herself. She did not work for fame or praise, but she was glad that others could see the value of empathy and care in action. Despite her growing recognition, challenges still arose. Occasionally, a horse would act out of fear or frustration, testing her patience and skill. Emma approached each situation with calmness, careful observation, and a steady voice. She had learned that every horse, like every person, had a story that shaped its behavior. Understanding that story, respecting it, and responding with empathy were the keys to building lasting trust. With each challenge overcome, Emma grew more confident, more compassionate, and more attuned to the needs of the horses and the land. One morning, Emma received a call about a nearby ranch struggling with a horse that had been abandoned and was dangerously thin and weak. Without hesitation, she gathered supplies, saddled her horse, and rode out to help. The journey took hours, but Emma felt no fatigue. Her mind focused on the horse in need, imagining how frightened and lonely it must feel. When she arrived, she found the horse huddled in a corner, trembling and wary of human contact. Emma knelt on the ground and spoke softly, letting the horse see her as a friend. Slowly, it inched closer, and over time, she coaxed it into trusting her enough to walk back to the barn. She fed it, cleaned it, and tended to its wounds, ensuring that it would recover under her care. The rescue became a turning point. Emma realized that her work could extend beyond her own ranch, touching lives far beyond the property lines. She began to see herself not just as a caretaker of horses, but as an advocate for animals in need. Her dedication inspired others to treat animals with respect, patience, and love. The community rallied around her, offering support and learning from her example. Emma felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that she was making a meaningful difference in the world. As the months turned into a year, the ranch had become a sanctuary. Horses that had once been feared or neglected now thrived, living in harmony with each other and the humans who cared for them. Emma's methods had proven that patience, understanding, and empathy were far more effective than fear or force. The ranch had become a place where animals could heal, grow, and live freely, and where humans could learn the importance of trust, compassion, and connection. Jack, who had been a mentor and companion through it all, often reflected on how much the young woman had changed not just the ranch, but his own perspective. "You've done more than I ever imagined," he said one evening as they watched the sun set over the fields. "You've created something extraordinary here." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of humility and gratitude. "It's not just me," she replied. "It's all of us, the horses, the land, the people who care. Together we make it strong." One crisp evening, as the sun painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emma walked through the paddock with the herd following her closely. She stopped at the edge of the field and turned to look at the ranch, her heart full. This land, these animals, and the work she had done were more than she could have imagined. She thought of her grandfather, of the lessons he had taught her, and of the quiet strength that had always guided her. She realized that she had found her true purpose, caring for the horses, the land, and the community that had welcomed her back. The chestnut mare with the scar nuzzled her shoulder. Thunder lowered his head to allow her to stroke his mane. Daisy grazed peacefully beside her, and Spark danced playfully near her feet. Emma laughed softly, feeling a sense of completion and harmony. The bond she had built was not just with the animals. It was with life itself, with every challenge, every lesson, and every moment of trust and love. She had discovered the true power of empathy, patience, and dedication. Emma knew that there would always be new challenges, storms, injuries, or frightened horses, but she felt ready. She had learned to remain calm, to observe, and to respond with understanding. The ranch had become a place of growth, healing, and love. The horses had become her family, the land her home, and the community her extended support. Together, they had created something extraordinary, something that would last for generations to come. In the quiet of the evening, as the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle above the ranch, Emma stood among the horses, feeling the wind on her face and the soft sounds of their breathing. She whispered to them, as she always did, words of comfort and love. They responded with gentle nuzzles and soft whinnies, a language of trust and understanding that needed no translation. Emma smiled, knowing that she had found her place in the world, a place where love, patience, and connection could create miracles. And in that moment, Emma understood something profound. She had not just returned to her grandfather's ranch, she had returned to herself. She had found her purpose, her courage, and her family in the form of the horses she loved. The ranch, once silent and weary, now thrived with life, laughter, and trust. Emma whispered once more, her voice carrying softly through the night. The horses listened, calm and content, as if to say that they too had found a family in her. The journey that had begun with a single step into the paddock had grown into a life of purpose, love, and harmony. Emma knew that she would continue to care for the horses, teach others, and nurture the land for years to come. The lessons of patience, empathy, and understanding had become a part of her, shaping her into someone who could make a lasting difference. The ranch was no longer just a place. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a testament to the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. And as Emma stood among the horses, the wind carrying the faint scent of hay and wildflowers, she felt a quiet joy that was impossible to describe. She had returned home not just to a place, but to a life that was meaningful, full, and alive. And in the hearts of the horses, and in her own heart, the connection they shared would endure forever. A reminder that love, patience, and trust could create miracles in the most ordinary places.